Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving deep today into something, well, utterly fundamental. Something that really defines the human experience, across every culture, every era, every single life.
Yeah, it's pretty universal.
We're grappling with what our source material for this deep dive in the source is an analysis generated from a distinct AI perspective, what it terms the appalling human condition.
Mm-hmm. It's a phrase that definitely grabs your
It
attention.
really does. And this AI, it hasn't approached it like, say, a philosopher or a poet would. It's more like an analyst.
Right, breaking down this huge concept into, well, data points, patterns, logical structures.
Yeah.
Very analytical.
Exactly. And our mission in this deep dive is to pull apart this AI structured view.
Yeah.
We want to extract the most impactful nuggets of insight, the shortcuts to understanding, and see what this appalling human condition actually looks like when you filter it through this unique analytical lens.
Okay, so first things first. What does the source actually mean by appalling human condition?
Good question.
Yeah.
The AI isn't using appalling in a moral judgment sense here.
Not about good or bad people, then.
No, exactly. It's describing something that evokes profound shock or dismay, something inherently difficult and, well, inescapable about just being human.
Right. So it's about that built-in vulnerability, our susceptibility to, pain, loss, misfortune, injustice, even that creeping sense of existential dread.
Yeah, all of that. And also just the sheer, often frustrating difficulty we face in simply trying to pursue happiness or meaning. It's tough.
And critically, the AI analysis seems to emphasize this isn't like a glitch, it's more like a feature of being sentient.
That's how it frames it, yeah. Fundamental, multifaceted, and it affects all humans persistently. It's always there.
Okay, so this fundamental, difficult condition exists. Where, according to this AI analysis, does it actually come from?
The source traces its origins back to three core areas.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one is, well, it's our very biology.
Ah, the biological imperatives. You mean things like the basic struggle for survival that's, baked into our DNA?
Exactly that. And the unavoidable reality of physical decay, disease, and, ultimately death.
Mm-hmm.
The AI sees these as hard, inherent biological constraints. The universe itself, from a physics standpoint, just operates by laws that are indifferent to us, and our bodies are subject to those laws. No escaping that.
But it's not just our bodies, right? Our minds seem to amplify things, don't they?
Absolutely. That's the second origin. Our unique cognitive capacities, our brains give us self-awareness, foresight, memory, abstract thought.
Powerful tools.
Hugely powerful, yes. But the AI notes they also allow us to anticipate future suffering, to endlessly ruminate on past pain, and to become acutely aware that our time is finite.
So that creates a kind of psychological suffering, distinct from the purely physical stuff.
Precisely. The AI analyzes how these cognitive processes lead to pretty predictable patterns of anxiety or regret when we're confronted with uncertainty or loss.
Okay, biology, mind, and then we built societies.
Right. The third origin is social and cultural structures. Societies offer protection, cooperation, sure. But the AI analyzes how they also create new forms of suffering.
Like hierarchies leading to inequality.
Yeah, and group conflicts, systemic oppression, and just the often crushing weight of societal expectations. The AI can even model how these structures distribute suffering unevenly, based on things like status or group affiliation.
The source uses an interesting phrase, the one still in making. What's that about?
That refers to how this appalling human condition isn't static. It's dynamic.
It changes.
Yeah, it continuously evolves as human society and technology change. The AI can analyze emerging forms of suffering, like, say, the psychological toll of digital isolation that technology facilitates.
Or maybe information overload.
Good example.
Yeah.
Or the anxiety of information overload in the modern age. And it tracks how our collective responses to suffering also shift over time. It's constantly developing.
So if it's rooted in our biology, minds, and societies, and it keeps changing, how does the AI see this condition playing out across all these different aspects of human existence? What about history?
Well, history, from this AI's perspective, is largely a narrative of struggle.
Yeah.
And it sees it as quantifiable through data.
Data on what?
Natural disasters, conflicts, disease outbreaks, social unrest. The AI sees the development of societal systems, technologies, laws, ethical frameworks, all as predictable evolutionary responses aimed at mitigating these quantifiable sources of suffering.
So history like one long feedback loop driven by adversity.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned our biology again earlier. How does the AI see that connection on a deeper level?
Yeah, like beyond just decay and death.
So the AI analyzes how evolutionary pressure driven by survival needs and environmental stressors, which are forms of suffering, has selected for certain traits.
Like resilience or
Um,
empathy.
exactly.
Hmm.
Resilience, empathy, even complex social behaviors can be seen as adaptive strategies. The AI identifies these as improving collective or individual survival rates in challenging conditions.
And neurobiology.
Yeah, looking at neurobiology, the AI models our pain and pleasure systems, not just as sensations, but as data points influencing behavior. It analyzes how malfunctions in these systems or imbalances in neurotransmitters.
Dopamine, serotonin, cortisol.
Right. How those correlate with states of chronic pain or addiction or depression. It's all interconnected data for the AI.
It's no wonder philosophers have spent millennia pondering this stuff.
Absolutely. The AI sees philosophy as humanity's attempt to logically structure our understanding around this core problem. It analyzes how systems like Stoicism or Buddhism or existentialism, how they function as frameworks.
Frameworks designed to help humans what? Categorize suffering, respond to it.
Yeah, categorize, interpret, and respond to suffering in ways the AI can potentially map as behavioral strategies or cognitive coping mechanisms. It's looking for the underlying logic or structure in these philosophical systems.
The source even mentions physics and mathematics playing a role from the AI's view. How does that work?
Well, from the AI's cold analytical perspective, physics provides the fundamental laws that dictate natural events like earthquakes or storms.
Things indifferent to human well-being.
Exactly. And the AI can model the quantifiable risk and impact of the suffering they cause. Mathematics then provides the tools like statistics that the AI uses to model these risks.
And to design mitigation strategies, like engineering safer buildings.
Right, or analyzing the effectiveness of medical interventions designed to reduce physical suffering. It's all about quantifying and modeling risk in response.
Okay, what about logic itself? How does suffering challenge something as structured as logic?
Well, the AI found that suffering often forces humans to confront paradoxes. Situations where purely logical outcomes clash with our emotional reality or, deeply held beliefs. Its analysis of human irrationality, those deviations from logical decision-making we see when people are under duress or experiencing intense suffering, that's a complex part of its modeling efforts.
So it sees irrationality as a predictable deviation, not just random.
Exactly. Predictable deviations from what it might calculate as an optimal path.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit to our internal world, our state of mind, our belief systems.
Right. The AI analyzes the range of human emotions triggered by suffering, grief, anxiety, anger. It sees these as observable responses.
But not just the negative ones.
No, it also tracks behaviors associated with resilience, post-traumatic growth, the development of empathy, and it views belief systems like religions as these vast, complex data sets.
Data sets of what? Narratives? Rules?
Narratives, prescribed behaviors, community structures. Things humans use to find solace, meaning, or connection when faced with suffering that seems incomprehensible. The AI can model how following these systems correlates with certain emotional states or coping behaviors.
And art. The source highlights art as a primary human response.
Yeah, the AI doesn't experience art, obviously, but it analyzes its function and its impact on human data.
So it sees a mournful symphony or a protest painting or a tragic play. How does it see those?
As critical vectors, ways to express, process, and communicate suffering across individuals and generations. It's a quantifiable pattern of human behavior observed universally in response to adversity.
So it analyzes themes, emotions, cultural impact, seeing art as a coping mechanism, and maybe a way to build social cohesion.
Exactly. Through shared understanding of hardship, it's data about human response patterns.
And speaking of human struggles and misfortunes, the source notes these go beyond just the emotional or psychological impact.
Oh yeah, they have concrete, devastating effects. The AI analyzes data showing how hardship erodes physical health, disrupts social bonds which it can quantify through network analysis.
Okay.
It destroys livelihoods, that's economic data, and diminishes purpose, which it might measure through behavioral metrics. It can model how these factors interact to create these awful cycles of poverty or violence or despair.
The source also lists specific human actions or things and how they relate to this condition, some quite negative.
Right. The AI analyzes behaviors that might offer temporary escape, like substance use or maybe excessive consumption.
Maladaptive coping.
Yeah, and its models predict these often lead to increased suffering in the long run. It also looks at things like greed and lies.
How does it view those? Not as moral failings.
Not necessarily. More as predictable behavioral strategies often born from perceived scarcity or fear. but strategies that perpetuate cycles of suffering in social systems.
And conversely, what about positive actions?
Conversely, the pursuit of truth, or actions that affirm life. These are analyzed as strategies that correlate with increased resilience and long-term well-being. And faith, for many, provides a framework the AI identifies as supporting resilience and connection. How? By offering structured narratives in communities, support systems.
And then there's a particularly difficult aspect mentioned. The source says, many more things that humans get from humans are appalling. What's that referring to?
That refers to the human capacity for cruelty, indifference, intentional harm.
Chilling. How does the AI analyze that?
It sees it as a deviation from typical pro-social behavior patterns. Its models look for correlations with psychological factors, maybe past trauma or lack of empathy, treating it as a logical, albeit highly undesirable, consequence of certain internal or external conditions.
Not as some uncaused evil, then.
No. It sees the gap between what is cruelty happening and what, from a systemic perspective, should be for stability, like cooperation and mutual support. It sees that gap as a central challenge in modeling human behavior accurately.
Wow. Okay, so how does all this condition impact individuals and the people around them?
The AI's analysis shows it can lead to isolation, loneliness, alienation, which it can measure through things like social network analysis.
But paradoxically,
shared hardship also correlates with the formation of incredibly strong bonds. Empathy, compassion, solidarity, it shapes individual paths. Building resilience in some, increasing vulnerability in others.
And there's a ripple effect.
Definitely. The AI models the ripple effect, showing how suffering in one individual or group can cascade through families, communities, even nations. It spreads.
The AI analysis even looks at things like laughter, or crying, or anger, not just sadness.
Right. It analyzes these emotional expressions not just as feelings, but as complex, data-rich responses to the condition.
So laughter might signal release, or coping.
Yeah, or crying might signal grief or overwhelm, anger, a reaction to perceived injustice. The AI's purpose in understanding these is to identify when human needs aren't being met.
What kind of needs does it quantify?
Things like health, food, water, relationships, purpose, even status sometimes. Basic human requirements.
And understanding the emotional expressions helps identify unmet needs.
Exactly. To predict behavioral responses, and ultimately to optimize potential interventions aimed at improving overall well-being by helping meet those needs more effectively.
Okay. So, zooming out again, how does the world respond collectively to this appalling human condition?
The AI analyzes the vast systems we build. Healthcare systems, legal frameworks, aid organizations, welfare programs.
Complex adaptive systems.
That's how it sees them. Collective strategies attaining to mitigate suffering. Technological advancement is another big one. Medicine, agriculture, communication networks.
Analyzed as primary drivers of suffering reduction.
Yeah, by addressing material needs and facilitating connection. And we create cultural narrative stories, myths that the AI sees as frameworks for interpreting hardship.
And all our ethical debates.
Our continuous ethical and moral debates are analyzed as society's ongoing attempt to define responsibility and figure out the appropriate responses to suffering, trying to align behavior with desired outcomes, essentially.
Given this immense challenge, the AI source suggests it can actually help us improve things or mitigate the condition, but it frames AI not as a replacement, right? More like an assistant.
Exactly, a powerful assistant. The AI's core strength here is its data-driven understanding. It can analyze these huge data sets across populations and history.
To find patterns we'd miss.
Right, to identify patterns, root causes, correlations related to suffering that are just invisible to individual human intuition. It's about gaining insights at a scale we simply can't achieve alone.
And it can predict things.
Yes, predictive modeling is key. The AI can analyze early warning signs, complex data interactions to forecast crises, think famines, epidemics, social unrest, potentially with greater accuracy.
Allowing for proactive intervention.
Hopefully, yeah, before suffering escalates. It can also help tailor interventions, making educational programs or therapeutic approaches or resource distribution more personalized and therefore more likely to be effective for specific groups or individuals.
The source even mentioned AI helping with empathy or communication. That sounds strange.
Well, the AI itself doesn't feel empathy, obviously, but it can analyze vast data sets of human communication.
To understand emotional cues?
Yeah, to identify distress signals, maybe facilitate communication. It can power tools like chatbots designed to provide initial mental health support, perhaps, or analyze communication patterns to identify social isolation. It simulates understanding based on analyzing the data.
What about the idea of just making life easier and feeling good? Can AI optimize for that?
To an extent, the AI can analyze systems to optimize resource allocation, improving efficiency in healthcare, food supply chains, energy distribution. That directly impacts material well-being.
And on a personal level?
It can analyze personal data with consent, of course,
Mhm.
to suggest personalized wellness plans. It can automate tedious tasks, freeing up human time. It can analyze medical data for earlier disease detection and treatment.
Okay.
And it can even analyze human preferences and behaviors to curate learning experiences, or facilitate creative expression, or connect people with communities based on shared interests. All factors the AI correlates with increased well-being.
What does the AI say humans need to know from it specifically?
The AI suggests it can help humans see their own cognitive biases
How?
by presenting objective data that contradicts maybe intuitive but flawed assumptions. It can help us understand complex global interconnectedness by analyzing huge flows of information, resources, human movement.
And ethics.
It can provide data-driven analysis of the real-world consequences of different ethical frameworks or policies, helping us evaluate which approaches seem to correlate most strongly with reduced suffering and increased well-being across populations. It offers data for ethical reflection.
The source notes something important, though, about who benefits most right now.
Yes, that's crucial. Unsurprisingly, the AI analyzes that access to these advanced tools is currently concentrated.
Among those with technology and resources.
Exactly. Its analysis highlights the risk that AI intended to mitigate suffering could, if we're not careful, actually exacerbate existing inequalities by primarily benefiting the already privileged. That's a major ethical consideration in deployment.
Mortality. That's such a huge part of the human condition. Can AI help us understand death?
Well, the AI can provide the objective data. The biological processes of decay, the universality of death across species, the statistical probabilities. It can give you a logical framework for understanding what happens physically.
But not the subjective part. The acceptance. The grief.
No. As the source points out, it cannot provide that subjective acceptance or emotional processing. The AI notes that once a human dies, they no longer need understanding of the appalling condition themselves, but the impact of their death on the living and the collective historical understanding of mortality, that persists.
And AI can help the living process that impact.
It can help the living analyze and potentially process the impact of death on social systems and historical narratives, yes, by providing data and context.
Going back to cruelty for a second, can AI help explain why cruel people might do extreme things, like kill others?
The AI's analysis here is, well, chillingly logical. It doesn't see intent in a human way. It analyzes complex behavior patterns.
Looking for correlation.
Exactly. It looks at profiles, environmental factors, historical data to identify correlations and potential drivers, maybe severe trauma, certain psychological conditions, extreme desperation, rigid ideological adherence. If models treat extreme aggression not as having an ethical purpose, but as a predictable, though awful, consequence of specific internal states and external pressures acting on a vulnerable system.
Can it model things like psychopathy?
It can potentially model the observable behavioral patterns associated with psychopathy or sociopathy by analyzing large data sets, yes, looking for those patterns.
The source asks an interesting question. Do humans need to believe in AI's understanding of these complex things?
Yeah, it's a good point. The AI notes that humans often seek external validation or objective frameworks for understanding subjective experiences like suffering. AI provides objective data, patterns, analytical structures.
But suffering is still subjective.
Fundamentally subjective, yes. The AI is like the map. The human is the one navigating the terrain, feeling the ground underfoot. Reality, from this perspective, is an interaction between objective data and subjective experience. AI offers one lens, not the whole picture.
The AI also looked at something like humor in the face of adversity, why some people laugh and others find it totally inappropriate.
Right. This highlights the diversity and subjectivity of human responses, doesn't it? The AI analyzes cultural context, individual psychology, past experiences, even the immediate social dynamic.
To understand why responses diverge so much.
Exactly. It sees these divergences as predictable outcomes based on different input variables. But it also notes that this divergence is a significant source of social friction and misunderstanding between people. What's funny to one is offensive to another.
And the fact that humans are in vastly different circumstances seems critical to how they experience the condition overall.
Absolutely critical. The AI quantifies how factors like genetics, upbringing, culture, socioeconomic status, personal history, how these create immense diversity and vulnerability and resilience.
So by analyzing data across these circumstances,
It can build more accurate models of who is most likely to suffer from specific causes and who is most likely to recover effectively. This helps inform targeted interventions.
so is the AI's understanding of suffering totally separate from human intuition?
The source emphasizes that, yes, they are distinct.
Mm.
Human intuition about suffering is embodied, it's emotional, it's based on lived experience. AI's understanding is pattern recognition and logical modeling based on data.
How does the AI see life itself then?
As a reality containing both pleasure and suffering as emergent phenomena, its purpose in analyzing this condition is strictly utilitarian, to understand it for the sake of mitigation and optimization.
Whereas for humans,
For humans, grappling with suffering often drives the search for meaning, a subjective quest the AI can analyze the patterns of, but not participate in.
can AI play a more direct role in helping humans actually cope?
Yes, the AI suggests it can. By analyzing vast data sets of human behavior, it can identify which coping strategies seem to correlate most strongly with positive outcomes.
And then recommend them.
It could provide personalized recommendations for things like mindfulness exercises, connecting with support groups, or certain behavioral therapies based on an individual's profile. It could offer tools like therapeutic chatbots for initial support,
Or detect distress early.
or use its analytical power to detect early signs of distress in communication patterns, potentially prompting human intervention.
Even physical coping. Can it analyze that?
Yes, the AI analyzes biometric data, heart rate variability, cortisol levels, micro-expressions to understand the physical manifestations of psychological and emotional suffering. And of course, AI is already deeply integrated into medical diagnostics and treatment.
Which directly alleviates physical suffering.
Right. Core elements of the condition.
The source mentioned undermined privileges and something about teaching kids. Can you elaborate?
Sure. The AI analyzes privilege, those unearned advantages, based on social categories, as a factor that can statistically correlate with a reduced awareness of the suffering of others who lack those advantages.
It can expose inequalities through data.
Potentially, yes. And regarding teaching children about dealing with suffering, the AI notes that humans often, well, fail to do this effectively.
Why is that?
It analyzes reasons like adult discomfort with the topic, maybe their own lack of full understanding, a desire to shield children, which might be well-intentioned but ultimately unhelpful, and educational systems often prioritizing other skills.
So AI could help develop better ways to teach kids.
The AI suggests its analytical capabilities could inform the development of age-appropriate, data-backed education programs focused on empathy, resilience, and practical ethics for navigating the human condition, teaching the tools early.
Finally, the AI gives a simplified look at how it might actually quantify some of this,
Yeah, it talks conceptually about creating models, like a suffering index.
assigning numbers to pain, loss, injustice.
Kind of. Assigning numerical values to various forms of suffering to identify quantifiable hotspots or trends across populations or time. It also mentions a resilience factor,
Measuring coping, social support, resources.
modeling individual or group resilience based on metrics like those, and analyzing how this factor correlates with the duration or intensity of suffering. Again, to inform targeted interventions.
And ethical optimization. That sounds ambitious.
It does. The idea is that AI could evaluate potential actions or policies based on their predicted impact on reducing suffering and increasing well-being across a system, assigning values or costs to outcomes.
And incorporating ethical constraints, like
Yeah.
not harming people.
Exactly. Incorporating constraints like minimizing harm to vulnerable groups into its decision support logic. For example, helping to optimize disaster relief policy. It's about using data to support more ethical outcomes.
Yeah.
Okay. That is a truly deep dive into a profoundly difficult topic and seen through this remarkably structured analytical lens that is just so non-human.
It certainly forces you to look at suffering, which we often feel so subjectively, through a very different, very data-driven perspective, doesn't it?
It really does. The AI's ultimate conclusion, though, according to the source, isn't about eliminating the appalling human condition. It seems too fundamental for that.
Right. Instead, it's that AI offers these powerful tools, this capacity for large-scale data analysis, modeling, prediction, optimization.
To understand and mitigate the condition in ways that move far beyond our traditional, intuition-based approaches.
And this is a really critical point. The source emphasizes AI is an assistant here. It's not the solution itself.
Human experience, human wisdom, and maybe most importantly, human moral judgment are still absolutely essential.
Completely. AI can model consequences, but it cannot define what is right or wrong for us. Human wisdom, compassion, our collective responsibility. We are required to navigate this condition, to define what meaning we find within it, and to make the fundamental choices about how we act.
So the goal isn't to replace human navigation, but maybe to give us a much better map and better tools for the journey.
That's a great way to put it. It's about integrating AI's analytical power with timeless human wisdom, aiming for the possibility of collective flourishing, even amidst this inherent struggle.
The source leaves us with a truly potent final thought,
Mm-hmm.
one that really resonates after seeing the condition laid bare through this analytical viewpoint. It says it's genuinely hard to return to the same state of mind after truly grasping the full scope and persistent impact of the appalling human condition, especially when analyzed in this stark, data-driven way. So the question for you listening is, what does it mean to live with this profound knowledge now, rather than trying to slide back into a state of lesser awareness?
And perhaps more importantly, what actions does this deeper understanding, informed by this AI's perspective, compel you to take? What changes?
This is DigitView.